I never thought I'd be left out in the cold by my own daughter. I never imagined the man she married would strip me of my dignity in my lowest moment, and that she would let him. But what they didn't know was that life had one last card for me to play, and when I played it, everything changed. Get ready, because what you're about to hear is not just a story, it's a reckoning. Comment below where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more stories like this. My name is Margaret. I'm 58 years old, and until not long ago, I believed in something called unconditional love, especially when it came to family. I built my life around my husband and our daughter Amanda. Every meal I cooked, every holiday I planned, every dollar I saved was for them. When my husband passed from cancer last year, it felt like the floor vanished beneath me. But I told myself I still had Amanda. I still had my daughter. I sold the house my husband and I had built from scratch in Cedar Park, just north of Austin. Too many memories, too many nights waking up, expecting to hear his voice, calling from the kitchen. Amanda and her husband Chad offered me a place to stay for a while. Or at least Amanda did. Chad barely looked up from his phone when I moved in. Tried not to make waves. I kept to my small room in the back. I cooked, cleaned, offered to run errands, trying to be helpful, trying to stay out of the way. But Chad had a way of making me feel unwanted. His eyes always carried this irritation, like I was a splinter under his skin. It started with the small things. He'd roll his eyes if I asked a question. He'd change the TV when I was mid-show. Once I heard him mutter under his breath, "Freeloader," as he passed by me in the hall. I tried to convince myself I misheard, but deep down, I knew I hadn't. Amanda, she said nothing. I'd look to her for backup, for a word, anything. But she always played it down. He's stressed, she'd say. Work's been rough. I swallowed the shame and stayed quiet. That's what mothers do, right? But that night, that one night, it shattered me. We were at the dinner table. I had made chicken pot pie, his favorite. Amanda was scrolling on her phone. Chad sipping beer like he always did. The silence was heavy. Then out of nowhere, Chad looked up and said, "You know, maybe it's time we stop pretending this is temporary. We're not a charity." Amanda froze. I stared at him. "What do you mean?" He smirked. "I mean, how long is this supposed to go on? You're not working. You're not contributing. We've got bills. We didn't sign up for extra mouths to feed." My breath caught. My heart was pounding. I turned to Amanda, desperate. "Amanda?" She wouldn't meet my eyes. "Maybe it's best," she mumbled, "if you find something more stable. For everyone's sake. Everyone's sake." I didn't scream. I didn't argue. I stood up, walked to my room, packed my things. 2 suitcases. That's all I had left of my life. I didn't even cry while I packed. The tears came later when I stood outside their building, the wind biting through my coat, and realized I had nowhere to go. Amanda didn't walk me out. Chad didn't even bother pretending. I sat on the curb for an hour. My phone battery was dead. My heart was too. I remember thinking, this is what it feels like to be erased. That night, I checked into a motel, the kind where the wallpaper peels and the vending machine eats your change. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering how everything could turn so cold. wondering what I had done to deserve this kind of abandonment. The next morning, I sent Amanda a message. I understand. I love you always. No reply. The next week, I sent another, then another. Birthdays, little updates, silence. 3 months passed. Each day felt longer than the last. I tried applying for jobs, anything, but no one wanted to hire a grieving widow in her late 50s. With no recent work history, I considered cleaning houses, babysitting, but my body didn't move the way it used to. The loneliness. It was suffocating, and worse than that, the shame. I had given everything to that girl. How could she turn her back so easily? One evening, as I was going through a box of old family keepsakes, trying to feel close to something, anything, I found it. My mother's old diary. I hadn't read it in years, maybe never, but something pulled me to it. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, turned the pages, and that's when I found it. A name, a truth, a secret that changed everything. I remember the moment, clearly. My hands shook. My heart raced because suddenly, I wasn't just the mother who got kicked out. I was someone else entirely. And for the first time in months, I smiled. They took everything from me, but they had no idea what was coming. After that night, the days blurred into each other, like grey watercolors bleeding on a wet canvas. The motel room smelled of stale air and distant cigarettes. The buzzing hum of the vending machine outside my door became a lullaby of defeat. I stayed quiet. I didn't cry every night, but when I did, it was quiet. The kind of crying where your whole body trembles, but you keep it inside because no one's coming to comfort you. I texted Amanda again on the 4th day. A simple message. I'm okay. Just wanted to know how you are. No reply. I tried again 2 weeks later. Just a heart emoji. Nothing. I told myself she was busy. The diary was wrapped in a piece of faded muslin, tucked at the bottom of a box I'd labeled Eileen years ago. My mother's name. The first pages were grocery lists and church circles. The mundane breadcrumbs of a life. Then, halfway through, a change in the handwriting. Sharper, intentional. Margie, if you ever find this, it began. No one had called me Margie since I was 10. I have something to tell you about your grandfather's land. I didn't want to burden you until I was sure. The Walker tracked out in Pecos County. He left mineral rights with my name attached, and mine to yours. I never told your father. He wouldn't have understood. A man named Whitaker handled the lease back in 79. If you ever need it, check with the comptroller. There might be money sitting, waiting. It's not about greed. It's about dignity. I read the paragraph twice, then a third time. My mother, Eileen Walker, had died thinking she had left me something she didn't think my father would understand. My parents had fought about money more times than anyone could count. Dignity was a word she used like a prayer. I didn't sleep that night. I pulled out my phone. Its screen cracked like a web. The motel's Wi-Fi blinked in and out, but eventually, I reached the Texas Comptroller's unclaimed property database. It felt ridiculous typing my mother's name into a government website at 2 a.m, but there it was. Eileen Walker, estate, unclaimed royalties, miscellaneous, $100 plus. It didn't show the exact amount. It never did. Just enough to make you wonder. I held my breath and typed my name, Margaret Walker. Possible heir. I wasn't sure if my heart sped up because of hope or fear. I followed the prompts, uploaded the only documents I had. My mother's death certificate, scanned years ago, my own ID. The site told me it would take 4 to 6 weeks to process. 4 to 6 weeks might as well have been a lifetime. But for the first time since I'd left Amanda's curb, I had something to do. Besides survive. In the morning, I walked to the public library on Burnett Road to print more documents. The librarian, a woman with silver hair and Austin City Limits earrings, noticed my trembling hands. "You okay?" she asked gently. "Unclaimed property," I said, trying to sound casual. "My mother's, maybe mine." She nodded like she had seen this before. "I'm Lucia," she said. "If you need a notary or help scanning, we have both. Or if you just need a place to sit, we got that too." I spent the afternoon at a back table, spreading out the diary, highlighting names: Whitaker, Pecos, Walker Tract. It felt like being in school again. But this time the grade would be roof and food, and the possibility of forgiving myself for failing at a life I'd given everything to. 2 days later, a number I didn't recognize called my phone. I almost let it go to voicemail, but something told me to answer. "Is this Margaret Walker?" a brisk voice asked. "Yes." "This is David Kim, attorney with Kim and Fowler. My office got a referral from the library. Lucia said you might need counsel regarding an unclaimed property claim. It's usually straightforward, but if mineral rights are involved, title gets tricky. I take a 10% fee if we recover, nothing if we don't. I didn't have 10% to give anyone, but I had nothing else." "Okay," I said. "Tell me where to start." He told me. I overnighted a copy of the diary page. He called the comptroller's office. He made a list of documents like a letter to climb out of the hole I'd fallen into, birth certificate, probate affidavit, proof of kinship. I ran the errands with a focus I hadn't felt in months. I became an expert at bus routes. I bought a second-hand blazer for $20 at a Goodwill and wore it like armor. At night, I texted Amanda again. "I found Mom's diary." I wrote, "You should see it sometime." No reply. The motel clerk, a young guy named Blaze, who wore heavy rings and a permanently thoughtful frown, started leaving 2 packs of coffee on my dresser instead of 1. "You remind me of my aunt," he said once. "She's tough as nails." I held back tears and shook his hand like you do when someone offers you dignity. Then, the letter came from the comptroller. I held it under the sick yellow light of my room, afraid to open it. I'd been disappointed enough, but the envelope didn't let me pretend. I slid a fingernail under the flap and pulled out a single page. "Dear Miss Walker, we have reviewed your claim based on documentation provided and title research initiated by your counsel. You are the rightful heir to unclaimed funds derived from the mineral royalties of the Walker Tract, Pecos County, Texas. Enclosed is a remittance in the amount of $312, 478.16. My knees gave out. I sat on the edge of the bed and laughed, a sound that surprised even me. It wasn't joy exactly. It was oxygen. It was the difference between a locked door and a key. David called within an hour. We can push further on the title. There may be ongoing royalties if the well's still producing, but the suspended funds, those are yours now. They've been sitting in Austin gathering dust. I took the cashier's check to a credit union. The teller looked at me like I had won a lottery. In a way, I had. Only it didn't feel like luck. It felt like my mother had reached across time and put her hand on my back, steadying me. Open a savings account, the manager advised. Then a small checking. Don't tell anyone. Scams find this kind of money. Don't tell anyone. I thought of Amanda and felt the bruise inside me pulse. I won't, I said. Got on the bus, back to the motel. A thought hit me like a sudden Texas storm. Amanda and Chad were renting from a man named Garrett. I knew because I'd handled mail before I was escorted out. Garrett Holdings, LLC, it said, on the envelopes. Property taxes, water bills, the things that keep roofs over heads. I'd filed them for Amanda, like a good mother. Garrett. I scrolled through my phone, fingers shaking. The first result was a small-time landlord in North Austin who owned a cluster of older buildings. A photo of him popped up. White hair, folded arms, a thin smile. The article was about selling, aging landlords cashing out. He was 76, no kids. He preferred to sell simple, small properties, often with seller financing. Seller financing. The words rang like the bells in the church my mother used to drag me to. You didn't need a bank. You needed a down payment and a seller who was tired. I looked up their building, a 2-story brick U, wrapped around a patch of scrub grass. 12 units. The kind of place you drive by without seeing. But I had seen it too closely. I had watched the windows in the evening for Amanda's shadow. I had pressed my palm against the kitchen wall the night I left, as if it could absorb my pain and keep Amanda from feeling it. The address popped up on a listing site as Whisper Inventory. Not public, but available to the right buyer. Contact Sylvia Reyes, Premier Austin Realty. I dialed the number before I could talk myself out of it. Premier Austin Realty, this is Sylvia. Hi, I said. I'm calling about the Brookshire Meadows property. It's not on the MLS, she said, voice sharp but not unkind. You a broker? No, I'm a buyer. She paused. She'd heard that 1,000 times. Proof of funds. I looked at my purse where the account folder sat like a secret. I have it, I said. Can we meet? She agreed to coffee at a place near the lot, the kind of cafe where laptops bloom like mushrooms and conversations are whispered as if ideas might shatter. Sylvia was in her 40s, hair in a tight bun, nails a shade of red that meant business. She ordered black coffee. I ordered tea because coffee had started to feel like panic. Why this building? She asked, getting right to it. I lied because sometimes you need to. I live nearby, I said. I like the neighborhood. Conditions not great, she said. Deferred maintenance. Rents are low, too low. Lots of month to month. Owner's older. He'll do seller finance with 30% down if you can close in 45 days. 30%, I repeated, doing math in my head. 30% of what? Asking. 875. My tea burned my tongue. I swallowed it anyway. 30% was 262,500. I could, do that. Barely. I'd have moving pieces. I'd be putting almost all of it on the table. But I could do it. Why so low? I asked. Because the market's softening and the building needs love, she said. Because Mr. Garrett wants his monthly check without dealing with banks. Because, frankly, it scares most buyers. And because you'll inherit tenants who are comfortable paying less than they should. Less than they should. I flinched. The phrase sounded too much like Chad. I'll take a tour, I said. We walked the building that afternoon. Unit 2. A had a couch propped against the wall like a barricade. 1C smelled like curry and childhood. 2C had an old woman, Miss Rita, who opened the door in fuzzy socks and offered us stale cookies and stories about the Reagan years. Windows stuck, pipes rattled. The parking lot was a patchwork of cracks. When we stood in the courtyard, wind tugging at our coats, Sylvia asked if I wanted to see 3B. I knew before she said it. 3B was Amanda and Chad's. No, I said. Then, yes. The word left my mouth before I could pull it back. Sylvia knocked. We heard steps, a pause, the squeak of the bolt. Chad opened the door shirtless, a beer held like a badge. He didn't recognize me at first, because who expects their mother-in-law in a blazer with a real estate agent behind her? Then his eyes narrowed. What are you doing here? I'm with the agent, I said. We're touring. This is our home, he said, dragging a hand over his jaw. He looked past me at Sylvia, as if she might save him from me. We didn't get any notice. You're fine, Sylvia said smoothly. We have the owner's permission to walk the property. We won't step inside. Amanda appeared in the hallway behind him, face pale, ponytail askew. For a second, I saw her at 7, in pink sneakers, face damp from a summer sprinkler, running to me with open arms. Now her arms stayed at her sides, knuckles stiff. Hi, she said, brittle. Hi, I answered, tasting salt and iron. We'll go. We left. Outside, Sylvia watched me like a hawk. You know them? My daughter, I said. Sylvia's eyes softened. You sure about this? I looked at the brick, at the hard corners, at the little square of sky above the courtyard. Yes, I said. It was the first time in months I'd said yes to anything that mattered. The offer went in that night. We negotiated for 3 days. Mr. Garrett wanted 35% down. I held firm at 30. He wanted a balloon in 5 years. I pushed for 10. We met in the middle. 30% down. 8-year balloon. 20-year amortization. 6.25% interest. First payment due 30 days after closing. He wanted my personal guarantee. I formed an LLC instead. Eileen Sky Properties, named after my mother, because I wanted her in every signature. David, my lawyer, read the documents and nodded. It's not bad, he said. You'll need reserves. You'll need grit. I have both, I said, thinking of vending machine coffee and silence, and the way my chest felt the night Chad said the words, extra mouths to feed. Demure, you want property management? He asked. Yes, I said. I didn't want to knock on my daughter's door with a wrench and a clipboard. I wanted a layer between love and business, because I'd learned how love can disappear when money enters the room. We closed 39 days later in a lawyer's office, with too much glass and not enough warmth. Mr. Garrett's hands shook as he signed, not from weakness, but from relief. He told me he hoped I'd take care of the place. I told him I would when it was done, when the building was mine on paper, and in fact, I sat in my car and let a long breath leave my body. Then I pressed call on Sylvia's number. "We're closed," I said. "Congratulations, Margaret," she said. "You own 12 problems and a river of potential. Send the welcome letters," I said, "and send the rent increase notices." How much?" she asked. "We need to be careful. Texas has no rent control, but optics matter. For most," I said. Modest, phased. 10% over 3 months. Show them the plan. New locks, pest control, repair the stairs. "And 3B?" she asked, knowing. "Triple," I said. The word didn't come out hard. It came out like a fact. "They're month to month. Give them 45 days. There was a pause long enough for birds to fly through it. "Margaret," she said carefully, "that's aggressive." No, I said. "But there's a principle at stake." "What principle?" "My dignity," I said. "And the price of cruelty." "Okay," she said. "It's legal. I'll draft. The manager will post." I hung up and stared at my hands on the steering wheel. They looked like my mother's. I thought of her diary, of the words not about greed, but about dignity. I wondered where that line was, between justice and revenge, between teaching a lesson and burning a bridge you might one day need to cross. That evening, I checked into a different motel, not fancy, but clean. I put my suitcase in the closet, like I might stay a while. I made a cup of tea and sat by the window, watching the highway lights smear themselves across the glass like someone else's life. The next morning, the letters went out. "Dear resident, we are the new owners of Brookshire Meadows. Our goal is to improve the property and uplift standards to match the neighborhood. You will see pest service, stair repairs, new laundry machines, and improved security lighting in the next 90 days. In order to support these improvements and bring rents to market, your rent will increase as follows." Unit 3B's letter was shorter. Due to excessive below-market rates and the need to standardize the property. Your new rent, effective 45 days from the date of this notice, will be $3,150. Failure to remit will result in termination of tenancy. For questions, contact the management office. The manager, a polite man named Roy, with sad eyes, called me after he posted the notices. 3B wasn't home, he said. I taped it. "Thank you," I said, throat dry. "Just be ready." I didn't have to wait long. My phone rang at 5:12 p.m. The number was familiar. Amanda. I let it go to voicemail. Then I listened to her voice shake through the tiny speaker. "Mom, we got this letter. I don't understand. Our rent." They're saying. "Mom, please, can you call me back?" I called. She answered on the first ring, breathless. "Mom, they're raising it to $3,150. This has to be illegal." "It's legal," I said, softly. "Texas has no rent control. Why are you saying it like that? Like you know." Her voice was small and furious at once. "Can you talk to them, please? Tell them we can't pay that. Not right now." Chad's hours were cut, and in the background, I heard Chad. "Who is it?" His voice moved closer. "Is that her? Give me the phone." If she cared about us, she'd help. I could picture him, jaw tight, that familiar sneer. My mouth went dry. "Amanda," I said, "I want to talk to you." Alone, silence. Then a door closing, muffled. "Okay," she whispered. "I'm In the bathroom. I bought the building, I said. There are moments when time stops, in the space between a word and the breath that follows it. I could hear the tiny echo of the tile, the tremor in her inhale. What? I'm the new owner, I said, steady. Margaret Walker of Eileen Sky Properties. I bought it from Mr. Garrett. Why? She asked. A child again for a flicker, not understanding the shape of the storm she stood in. I swallowed. I could tell her the story about dignity. I could tell her the one about a diary, and a mother who believed love and truth could coexist. I could tell her about 3 months of silence, and a motel vending machine, and a boy named Blaze, who left me extra coffee because I reminded him of his aunt, instead, I said the only thing that needed saying. Because you sent me into the cold, Amanda, and I learned how to build my own fire. She didn't respond for a long time. I heard her breathing, rubbing at something, maybe her forehead, the way she did when she was overwhelmed. You bought it, she repeated. And you, Mom, you tripled our rent. Your unit was far below market, I said, and I have improvements to make. Improvements? She laughed, sharp and wet. Are you improving your heart? Because it seems broken. Amanda, I whispered, her name a rope I wanted to throw across a chasm. Then the line went dead. I didn't sleep that night. The question wasn't whether I had the right. The question was who I would be when the sun came up. Roy called at 9 the next morning. 3B requested a meeting, he said. Shall we? We met in the little management office near the laundry room. Fluorescent lights humming like a headache. Roy sat at the desk with his polite sadness. I sat in a chair with a back too straight. Then the door opened. Chad walked in first. Neck red, jaw set. Amanda followed, sunset shadows under her eyes. She didn't look at me. So, Chad said, dropping into a chair as if it owed him comfort. You're a landlord now. I'm an owner, I said. Owner, he said, like it tasted bad. You think you can just jack our rent and watch us dance? That's illegal. It isn't, Roy said, voice careful. Your lease is month to month. Notice was proper, Chad snorted. Perfect. We'll move. We'll move and leave you with that little piece of your soul you think is called dignity. Chad, Amanda murmured, touching his arm. He shook her off. Then he turned to me. You're not a mother, he said. You're a landlord with a grudge. I felt heat rise up my spine. I saw the night at the table, the quiver in my fork, the way Amanda's eyes skated past mine. I saw my husband's hand on mine in a hospital room. The drip, drip, drip of time. I'm a woman who survived, I said. And I'm a woman who learned to set a price on my own kindness. After watching it be squandered, Chad leaned back, smirking. Then set your price and we'll walk. Amanda finally looked at me. Mom, she said softly. Please. The word tilted the room. It was the same word she'd used at 5, asking me to check under her bed for monsters. It was the same word she'd used at 16 when a boy broke her heart and she wanted me to tell her she would be okay. I thought about the other tenants. Miss Rita in 2C with the fuzzy socks. The family in 1C whose little boy had drawn me a crayon picture when we'd toured. The couch's barricade in 2A. I thought about what kind of owner I wanted to be. Firm but fair. Improvements without cruelty. A person who made things better. I won't raise rents on anyone else beyond what's reasonable, I said. And I won't evict without cause. And us? Chad asked. You have 45 days, I said, feeling the weight of every syllable. You can pay the new rate and stay in a safe, improved home. Or you can find another place. Chad stood. We're done here. Amanda didn't move. She looked at me like a question. Why didn't you tell me? She asked. About the money, about the building. Because you didn't want extra mouths to feed, I said quietly. And I learned to feed myself. She flinched as if I'd thrown something. Then she stood too, slow. We'll figure it out, she said to Roy, almost apologetically. We'll let you know. They left. The door's little bell tinkled like a joke. Roy exhaled. That was something. Do we have any vacants? I asked. 2. 1B and 2D. Hold one for emergency placement, I said. Older women. I want to start a program. Short-term housing for women who... I gestured at nothing and everything. Who get erased? We'll work with the church or a non-profit. We'll do it right. Roy blinked. That's generous. It's strategy, I said, then softened. And it's right. After Roy left, I walked the courtyard alone, the air cool enough to remind me I was alive. The stairs to the second floor shook under my feet. I stopped at the landing outside 3B. I didn't knock. I didn't have the right, and I had every right. That paradox felt like my new skin. I slid a card under the door. It had the property, management number, and a note in my handwriting. For repairs. Call Roy. For a conversation. Call me. I love you. Mom. The improvements started that week. Exterminators, lock changes, new lights that made the courtyard less like a cave. Miss Rita paid her new rent in cash and hugged Roy with such ferocity he pretended to cough. The family in 1C brought me a plate of food I didn't deserve. 2A moved the couch and let the sun into their living room. On the 4th day, I saw Amanda in the courtyard at dusk, her hair falling loose from a ponytail, as if it had tried to escape something. She didn't see me at first. She was texting with both thumbs, fast. Then she looked up and froze. Hi, I said. Hi, she echoed, voice small. How are you? I asked, knowing the answer wasn't a sentence. She shrugged. He's mad, she said. I know. My voice didn't shake. That felt like a small miracle. Did you mean what you said? About the women? She glanced toward the management office. Did you mean the part about not raising everyone's rent crazy high? Yes, I said. I'll fix what's broken. I won't break what isn't. She swallowed and looked at the second floor railings. He told me not to talk to you, she said, so softly I almost didn't hear. He says you're manipulating. Am I? I asked, not to defend myself, but to see what she would say. She laughed once, a sharp puff of air. If this is manipulation, it's the weirdest kind. You bought a building to teach me a lesson. I shook my head. I bought the building to teach myself one. What lesson? That I can be more than who I was when you left me on that curb, I said. My throat tightened, but the words steadied. That I'm a woman who can save herself. She looked down at her shoes, then up at me, eyes shining. I'm sorry, she said, and the word was like rain after months of drought. I nodded. It wasn't enough. It was everything. Both could be true. Are you happy? She asked. as if the question were foreign in her mouth. Not yet, I said. But I'm not miserable, she nodded, rubbing her arms. The sky turned the color of bruised peaches. Somewhere, a dog barked a story none of us understood. Will you go to coffee with me? I asked. Not as owner and tenant, as mother and daughter. I don't know if Chad will. I didn't ask Chad, I said gently. She looked over her shoulder. At the door she shared with a man who once called me a freeloader for eating food I had cooked. Then she looked back at me and took a breath that sounded like a decision. Okay, she whispered. And then the door opened behind her. Chad stepped out, eyes flicking between us, reading our faces like a cop at a traffic stop. What's this? He asked, suspicion thick as oil. Nothing, Amanda said, backing away. We were just talking, I finished. Like people do. He smirked. Your 45 days are ticking. So is your decency, I said, before I could stop myself. He laughed and wrapped an arm around Amanda. She flinched so slightly. I wouldn't have seen it if I hadn't been cataloguing every twitch of her body since she was a baby. Coffee tomorrow, I said to her, not him. She gave the tiniest nod. He didn't see. I could end the story here, at the top of a hill with the city spread beneath and the possibility of a new road unfolding. But that would be dishonest. The truth is, reckoning doesn't end at a punchline. It doesn't end at a rent increase or a deed. It ends when something in you that was covered in dust stands up and walks. Coffee with Amanda was in a quiet place near the university. She ordered a latte and stared at the foam like it might tell her fortune. I ordered tea. We talked in circles at first. Weather, traffic, the new lights at the building. Then the circles tightened. Why didn't you stick up for me? I asked finally. Not as a weapon, but as a map. That night, she blinked hard. I thought I was choosing my marriage, she said. I thought that's what being a wife meant. I thought you'd be okay. I wasn't, I said. But I am now, and I won't be your punishment. I won't be your penance. I'll be your mother if you'll let me, she breathed out. He says you're trying to split us up. I'm trying to set a standard, I said. You can meet it with me or without me. That's your choice. Do you forgive me? She asked, voice almost gone. I'm working on it, I said. It sounded cold. It was honest. Forgiveness is a house I'm still building, she nodded. I might need help, she whispered. Not with money, with leaving. The word thudded between us like a heartbeat. I reached across the table and took her hand. I can help you leave, I said. I can help you stay gone. I can help you be safe, she nodded, tears cutting, clean tracks down her face. He doesn't hit me, she said quickly. He just takes air out of the room. I know, I said very quietly. I lived it. It's still violence when someone makes you small. We talked for an hour that felt like a year. I told her about the diary. She told me about nights she cried in the bathroom with a towel. Under the door, we made a plan. Not to blow up her life, but to give her choices. That's all dignity ever wanted. When we stood, she hugged me. Not the tentative hug of the courtyard. A real one. The kind you give when you remember that a person built you a childhood, brick by brick, and you want to lay one brick back. Don't tell him, she whispered. About our plan. Of course, I said. It's your story to tell. She left first. I watched her walk away, shoulders straighter than they'd been in months. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, my phone buzzed. A text from Roy. Heads up. 3B gave notice. 30 days. He was smug. She was quiet. I typed back. Noted. Thank you. Then I texted Amanda. I'm here. Whatever you need. On the last day of their tenancy, I stood in the courtyard under the new lights and watched 3B carry out boxes. Chad's friends joked too loudly. He laughed too hard. He didn't look at me. Amanda carried a small plant, cupped in both hands, like a promise. At the curb, he threw the last box into the trunk and slammed it like a period. Enjoy your empire, he said to me, loud enough for the stairwells to hear. I smiled, small. Enjoy your mirror, I said. You'll need it to find the problem in every room you walk into. He flipped me off and climbed into the driver's seat. Amanda stood for a beat longer, eyes on mine. Then she slid into the passenger seat. The car pulled away. I stood alone in the courtyard that had once felt like a cage and now felt like a campus. I thought about the women who would sleep here tonight. I thought about my mother and her diary, about my husband and his hand in mine, about the girl I raised who was learning, like me, to choose herself without apology. I walked up the stairs to 3B. The door hung open, empty echoes on the other side. The carpet needed replacing. The wall bore the ghost of a couch. I stood in the middle of the room and breathed. Then I pulled out my phone and dialed. Roy, I said when he answered. Get Miss Rita a new water heater. And call Sylvia. Tell her I'm ready for the next one. The next what? He asked. The next building, I said, looking out the window at a slice of Austin sky that had never seemed so wide. We've got work to do. And somewhere on I-35, a young woman in a passenger seat looked out her window and decided where the rest of her life would begin. 3 weeks after 3B moved out, the echo of that empty apartment lingered like a chorus. I couldn't stand in the doorway and see Amanda's shadow where it used to fall in the mornings. I could hear my own voice in the air, asking if she was okay. The room swallowed both. So I filled it with work. Contractors rotated through like seasons. Hector for the stairs and railings. Mira for the plumbing. Henry, who wore safety goggles like a fashion statement, for the lights. The courtyard got new fixtures that didn't buzz like broken bees. The laundry room got machines that didn't require a shoulder shove to start. Roy, our manager with the sad eyes that hid steel, set up a calendar in the office and checked boxes with quiet satisfaction. Miss Rita in 2C started keeping a little notebook by her door with ideas, written in large letters. She'd press it into my hand each Tuesday. Notes. More trash cans by mailboxes. Kids need place to draw. Peppermint tea in office. We did the tea. It made the office smell like Christmas. And memory. David, my lawyer, called with an update. We clean title. On the Pecos tract, he said. Royalties will come monthly. Not huge, but steady. Also, a pipeline easement from the 80s matured. There's a one-time payment. I'm sending you an email. I heard the amount and leaned against the kitchen counter so the number didn't knock me over. It wasn't obscene money, but it was enough to set aside reserves, to plan like a person who expected a future. I made 2 transfers that afternoon, one to a capital improvements fund for the building and one to a savings account I called the Eileen Fund. I said my mother's name out loud as I clicked. The word felt like a hand to hold. That night, I wrote a letter to Lucia at the library to thank her, and found myself crying in the middle of it. I didn't wipe the tears away. Sometimes paper needs salt to tell the truth. Amanda texted me on a Wednesday. Can we talk? Not urgent, just talk. I sent back, anytime, anywhere. She chose the little coffee place near the university again. She ordered a latte and tucked her hands in her sleeves. Like a girl in a drafty choir loft, I ordered tea and tried to keep my face from showing how badly I wanted to pull it into my arms and tell her I'd make it all okay. That was the old script. The new one required both of us to say harder lines. I have a new job, she said, surprising me, at a plant nursery on Koenig. Part-time now, maybe full-time if I prove myself. Plants don't lie, I said, smiling. No, she said. They just wilt when you pretend the window is enough. We danced around Chad, and then we didn't. He's angry, she said. But he's always angry. At the guy who cut him off. At the house with the barking dog. At the weather. At the people who make the weather. It's like argument is oxygen for him. And you? I asked. I'm tired, she said. I'm tired of pretending the door is closed when it isn't. I'm tired of telling myself I owe him a life because he chose me when I was 24 and stupid. I'm tired of thinking you're the villain in a story where you starved in a motel. It's not about villains, I said. It's about choices. She nodded. So I made one. I want to leave. The words fell between us like a stone into a still lake. Ripples took their time. What do you need? I asked Dot. She pulled a folded paper from her pocket, hands shaking like a leaf in wind. It was a list. It had bullet points and asterisks. Evidence of hope. Copy of my birth certificate, bank account in my name. My own phone plan, a P.O. box. He reads the mail. A place to stay. Not with you. Not yet. That would be explosive. I can help you with all of this, I said. We'll do it quietly, carefully. I got the account, she whispered. At a credit union near the nursery. I put $20 in. It felt like a cathedral. I laughed and covered my mouth. We made plans. She would gather her documents, license, a copy of our wedding certificate, social security card she'd hidden in a cookbook 6 years ago, and forgot. I'd get her a P.O. box. We'd set up an iPhone under my family plan that wasn't linked to his cloud. When she was ready, we'd move her into a small unit I'd keep empty as maintenance reserve, not an upgrade. A lifeboat, I told Roy. No paperwork on that one for now, I said. Just a quiet space. We'll call it Apartment E. For emergency, he said, eyes meeting mine with understanding. Got it. We didn't say the other word. Escape. The first time Chad came back to the building, it was to pick up a package he'd ordered to the old address. He stood in the office with a smirk like a knife and said, I need the box. He didn't say, please. Roy checked the log. Not here. Chad rolled his eyes. You probably stole it. We don't do that here, Roy said calmly. I stood behind the counter and felt my palms go cold. Chad looked at me then, straight through me. You think you're some kind of tyrant with a heart of gold, he said. You're just a landlord who got lucky. I smiled, small. Luck is a word people use when they can't see the work. He snorted. I'm taking you to small claims. You kept our deposit. I'd expected that. The unit had holes punched through 2 doors and a refrigerator shelf cracked like ice. Roy had photos and quotes. We'd sent an itemized letter within the 30 days required by law. The amount we kept was modest compared to the damage. But modest didn't matter in a man who needed outrage like caffeine. See you there? I said. He leaned across the counter as if he could reach my throat with only a posture. Do you know what people say about you? He whispered. Probably, I said. I just stopped caring. He laughed and walked out. Shoulders too big for his shirt. Anger too big for his life. When the door swung closed, Roy exhaled. I can ask Nia to come to the hearing, he said. Nia was the assistant manager, with a memory like a ledger. She did the move-out walk. Yes, I said. Then softer. Thank you. The small claims courtroom in Travis County smelled of old paper and new nervousness. People fidgeted. A woman in a beige suit with a bird pin smiled at everyone like it might help. It didn't. Chad sat at the plaintiff table with arms crossed and a stack of photos he'd printed at a drugstore the night before. They showed normal wear and tear. He'd convinced himself was something else. I sat with Roy and Nia and a folder. That made me feel like a competent person, playing a role I hadn't earned. The judge was a woman with kind eyes and a voice that made you want to tell the truth. She read the filings. She asked questions. Did you provide an itemized list within 30 days, Miss Walker? Yes. Do you have photographs from the move-out inspection? Yes. Mr. Taylor, did you provide a forwarding address? No. He grunted. Did you leave the unit in the condition it was leased? He smiled like a problem. More or less. The judge didn't smile back. When it was done, the judge found in our favor. Not meanly, just factually. Chad stood and shook, his head slowly, humiliated in a way that made the hair on my arms rise. He looked at me like a promise. This isn't over, he said. It can be, I said. Anytime you want it to be. He left. The birdpin woman smiled at me. It helped. We launched the emergency unit on a Tuesday with little ceremony and a lot of quiet joy. I partnered with a local nonprofit, Safe Alliance, to identify women who needed a soft landing on short notice. We set terms, 30 days, extendable to 90, nominal rent, case management. The first resident was a retired bus driver named Gwen with a scar over her left eye and a laugh that shook the walls. She baked cookies and left them on the office counter with notes like, "Ownership with kindness is still ownership. Good job." Miss Rita started a porch club in the courtyard on Thursday evenings, where people drank lemonade and told stories that stitched them to each other. The little boy from 1C chalked superheroes on the sidewalk. We put a bulletin board up by the mailboxes, and it filled with things a community shares when it remembers it is one. Babysitter available. Free couch. Good bones. Guitar lessons by Juan in 2A. First lesson free. On the first morning of October, I walked the property as the sun stretched pink over the rooftops. I stopped in front of the office and read the bulletin board like a prayer. Someone had tacked up a flyer. Eileen Sky Community Day. Saturday, free tacos, music, and a drive for essentials for the emergency unit. In small letters at the bottom, Thank you, Miss Margaret. I stood there until the tears cleared enough to see. Amanda's escape came together like a piece of music. Slow at first, a theme taking shape, then a quickening as instruments joined, and the melody found itself. We met at the nursery on her lunch breaks, surrounded by things that grow when you give them light and don't lie to them. She had a backpack with a separate pocket for her documents. I took pictures of everything, she said, stored them on the new cloud. We chose a day, a Thursday. He always worked late on Thursdays. He'd cut his hours at the shop, but picked up a nighttime side gig that paid under the table and in praise. He thrived on both. On Thursday morning, Amanda texted today. I drove to a storage facility off Airport Boulevard with a contract and a smile that made the clerk relax. Month to month, I said. Climate control. She handed me a lock like a blessing. At noon, when the sun was mean, Amanda took 6 trips up and down the stairs with boxes so small they looked like nothing. We had planned for that. No suitcases. Nothing that screamed. She left the couch. She took the plant. Cuttings wrapped like secrets in damp paper towels. She left his college hoodie. She took her grandmother's cookbook with the Social Security card stuffed in the back. At 3:35 p.m., she put the last box in the back of my car and closed the hatch soundlessly. She stood still for a moment. Then she looked up at 3B like a person looks at a photo of themselves they don't recognize anymore. Ready? I asked. She nodded. The nod was both yes and goodbye. We drove to apartment E. I'd made the bed with new sheets. I'd put a small lamp on the dresser that cast a pool of light like a refuge. A calendar on the wall had only one thing on it. Breathe. She put the plant on the windowsill and turned to me like a person meeting herself for the first time. Is this okay? She asked. Am I allowed? You're allowed, I said. It's your life. We sat on the edge of the bed and held hands like a rope across water. She didn't cry. Not then. Later, probably. For now she was a person, in motion. And motion is a kind of miracle. She texted him at 5:12 p.m. I'm safe. I've left. Please don't come to the building. I'll talk when I can. She turned the phone face down and closed her eyes. He called 11 times. He left messages that swung like a pendulum. Rage, apology, rage, sweet threat. She didn't listen. She spent the night at apartment E. I didn't sleep much. I listened for every sound and reminded myself that vigilance is a season, not a life. At 10:03 a.m. the next morning, Chad arrived. Roy called me. He's in the office, he said. He wants to know where she is. I'm coming, I said. When I walked in. Chad was pacing, holding his phone like a warrant. He turned. When the door opened, You, he said, pointing. You did this. She did this, I said, stepping between him and the back hall, where the emergency unit key hung on a peg. She made a choice. Respect it. He laughed, ugly. Respect? Like you respected our marriage. Like you respected our home when you jacked the rent and kicked us out. No one kicked you out, I said calmly. You chose to leave when you realized you couldn't afford the life you wanted on the work you were willing to do. You think this is clever, he said, stepping closer. You think you're a hero. I think I'm a mother, I said, and a landlord. and a person who won't let your anger set the terms anymore. He looked like a man deciding whether to tip a table over. Then he smiled, slow. I could ruin you, he said. All I need is a rumor and a few calls. You've been ruining me for months, I said. I'm still here. He stepped back. She'll come home, he said, voice low. She's mine. No, I said. She's hers. He left. The door swung hard enough to rattle the frame. Roy leaned against the desk and put a hand to his chest. I thought I was going to throw up, he said. You did great, I told him. You didn't. He laughed, shaky. Then we both did. Because sometimes the only thing that keeps you upright is the absurdity of your own nerves. I went to apartment E. Amanda sat on the floor with her plant in her lap. A bowl of cereal on the carpet beside her like a civilized anchor. She looked up at me and I held up my palms. He came by, I said. He wanted to bluster. We didn't let him. She nodded. Thank you. Do you want to file a protective order? I asked gently. Safe can walk you through. No pressure, just options. She exhaled. Options, she said, like a foreign word she was trying on. Yes. Let's talk to them. The Eileen Sky Community Day happened under a sky that decided to behave. People brought casseroles and stories. A guitarist named Juan played songs that made toddlers dance, and older men remember the weight of their own youth. Hector's wife set up a taco stand and refused to take $1. We set up a donation table for the emergency unit, and people brought things that matter when you have to start over. Pots, towels. A microwave that looked like it could make grief edible if you pushed the right buttons. Lucia, from the library, came with a crate of books and a sign. Free, no questions. She hugged me like someone who had seen me cry under fluorescent lights and was glad to see me standing in the sun. Miss Rita gave a speech she hadn't planned and should have. This courtyard used to feel like a hallway to a bad day, she said. Now it feels like a porch, like a place you can sit and breathe. That's Margaret. That's Roy. That's all of us deciding not to be landlords and tenants, but neighbors. You hear me? Neighbors. People clapped like the word could fix the pipes. Maybe it could. At the end of the day, when paper plates piled and laughter thinned, Amanda stood next to me and watched the sky turn the color of the inside of peaches. I used to think your life was small, she said quietly. Dinner, laundry, nice holidays. I didn't see the ferocity in it. You weren't supposed to, I said. That was the point of good mothering. She nodded and wrapped her arm around my waist. A hug that said new terms. She had a key to apartment E on her ring now. She spun it slowly with her thumb. Will you be okay? I asked. Tonight? She smiled. Tired but free. I'm okay, she said. For the first time in a long time, I'm okay. David called 2 days later. Another royalty check, he said. Smaller, but it proves the well's still producing. Also, I talked to a broker about the easement buyout. If you want to take it, you could. What would you do? I asked. He paused. You're building something, he said. Liquidity helps when you're building. I thought about pipes and porches and papers that make an apartment a home. I thought about Miss Rita's fuzzy socks and Gwen's laugh and the little boy's chalk superheroes. I thought about the way my hands shook when I wrote the first check and didn't now. Take it, I said. And David, Draw up papers for a non-profit arm. Eileen Sky Foundation will fund the emergency unit. We'll set up a scholarship with the library. Small, then bigger. He laughed softly. I like the way you think. So did my mother, I said. She just didn't live long enough to see it. Buying the next building wasn't about spite. It was about momentum. Sylvia found it. A tired 8-unit. A mile away, brick faded to a shade of stubborn. Owner out of state. Management company inattentive. Tenants who deserved better. We could do better. The price was ambitious. So was I. We used a mix of royalties and a small loan that made me feel like a person the bank believed in. Roy agreed to expand his hours. We hired Nia full-time. We painted the doors a color that made neighbors stop and smile for no reason. We called it Hummingbird Court, not because hummingbirds hover, but because they move fast and light and survive things that should break them. Amanda came to the closing. She sat in the glassy office and watched me sign my name over and over until it looked like someone else's. You're really doing this, she said. All like sunlight. We're doing this, I said. I need a resident services coordinator. Are you available? The pay won't be as much at first as your skills deserve. The hours will be weird. The gratitude will be inevitable. She laughed and cried at the same time. Yes, she said. I want to do work that doesn't demand I be smaller to fit it. Then you're hired, I said. Your first project is to name the room in the office, where people can come when they can't breathe. She walked to the window and looked at the courtyard. She wiped her eyes. The room of breath, she said. No, the room of next. Perfect, I said. Everyone needs a next. Chad didn't go quietly. He filed a complaint with a consumer site that made truth optional. He left reviews that read like poetry, written by a person who'd never met a period. He showed up once at Hummingbird Court and leaned against the brick like gravity had options. I want to talk to my wife, he said to Roy, who was on the ladder replacing a light that flickered like a threat. Get her. Not your wife, Roy said, without looking down. Not your building. Not your day. Chad spit on the ground like a teenager. He took one step toward the office and stopped when he saw me inside with Nia and Amanda. Our heads bent over a calendar with events like tenant rights workshop and Saturday care, free childcare so you can breathe. He watched us for a second through the glass. Then he looked at the flyer on the window. Safe Alliance office hours. Confidential support here. He looked away fast, like the word safe burned. He left. He always left. It became his one good habit. Not every day was cinematic. Some days were receipts and broken faucets, and a woman in 2D who swore the air smelled like onions, even when all the onions in the world were innocent. Some days my back hurt, and my hope felt like a coat too heavy to wear and too cold to take off. On those days, I went to the room of next, sat in the chair by the window, and read the binder Amanda kept with success stories written in nervous ink by steady hands. Found a job, got my GED, left him, stayed gone. Sometimes I'd find a note I didn't expect. One day, you are not a landlord. You are proof that repairs can be personal. Signed, Gwen. Another day, Mom, thank you for buying the building. Not because you tripled my rent, but because you tripled what I thought I was capable of. I stood for a long time with the paper in my hands. The room too small for the thank you. The last time I saw Chad in court, it wasn't about us. He'd gotten into a fight at a bar with a man who'd asked him to stop saying something slurred and ugly. The hearing was quick, procedural, a plea, a fine, a warning. He stood outside afterward and smoked a cigarette with the defiance of a man who thinks smoke is a personality dot. He didn't see me. I didn't walk up. That was the old story. Confront, accuse, finish the scene with a line that would make a good. They clip. This was the new story. Notice, breathe, walk away. Amanda had filed for divorce. With a pro bono attorney from the legal clinic Lucia had recommended. The paperwork was dense and unsentimental. It did its job. The decree had words like dissolution and property and restore. The last word was the only one that mattered. On the day it was final, we went to a little diner that looked like the inside of my childhood. Amanda ordered pancakes with strawberries. I ordered eggs and watched her eat like a child who'd finally been invited to a table where she could be hungry and still forgiven. "Do you regret anything?" she asked, eyes on the syrup. "Yes," I said. "But not this." She smiled. "Me either." She looked out the window at a world that was newly hers. "I want to go back to school," she said. "Not for him, for me. Social work, or maybe business, so I can run the foundation with you and not just stack chairs." "You're already running it," I said. "We'll get you the paper that proves what you're already doing." She laughed. The sound made the silverware on the table vibrate. Like joy had a frequency. We hosted a holiday dinner in the courtyard in December. Lights strung like a promise. Heaters humming like good machines. People brought dishes that told their family stories. I made chicken pot pie because I decided to rescue the dish from that night and make it ours again. When I set the tray on the table, Amanda placed her hand on my wrist. "Full circle," she said. "No," I told her. "Spiral up. Circles never move." She handed me a wrapped box with a ribbon that looked like a second chance. Inside was a key on a leather fob with a tiny metal wing. "For the next building," she said. "We'll hang it on the wall until it's real." I held it like a sacrament. "Okay," I whispered. "We'll make it real." Later, under the lights, Miss Rita made a toast that began with joy and ended with a joke so terrible it made everyone laugh. From relief, Gwen found me near the edge of the crowd and pressed a photograph into my hand. It was of the courtyard before and after. In the before, the grass looked like it had given up speaking. In the after, people stood in little clusters of warmth. The same space, different weather. On the back, Gwen had written, "What you fix, fixes you too." I tucked it into my pocket like a talisman. In January, we launched the library scholarship. We called it the Eileen Walker Grant and made the application 2 questions long. What do you want to learn? What scared you and you did it anyway? Lucia cried. When we unveiled the little shelf at the library, with a brass plate and my mother's name, I cried too, because I realized my mother had been dead for years and was more alive in that room than she'd been in my heart for a long time. We funded 5 laptops for women who needed to write resumes in places that didn't smell like despair. We paid off 3 utility bills that felt like cliffs to the people who owed them. We created a little phrase for what we were doing, micro mercies. It wasn't grand, it was granular. It was what I wished someone had done for me in a motel. When the vending machine coffee tasted like defeat, Amanda designed the flyer. It had a hummingbird and a key, and the words, "Dignity looks good on you." At the end of spring, I drove to Cedar Park and parked in front of the old house, the one I had sold. When grief made furniture impossible, the new owners had painted the porch and hung a swing. A kid's bike lay in the grass at an angle that meant happiness. I sat in the car and let memory do what it wanted. It ran its fingers through my hair and then left me be. My phone buzzed. "David." "We got a letter," he said. "There's another tract, smaller. A cousin you didn't remember. There might be something there, if you want to explore it." I looked at the house that had once held my life, like a bowl holds soup. It had fed me. It had finished its job. "Let's explore," I said. Sometimes in the early morning when the city is a secret, I walk the courtyards, mine now, ours, and listen to the quiet that exists when people are safe. It has a different tone than the quiet that exists when people are afraid. You can hear the difference if you tilt your head, if you've lived both. I think about Chad sometimes, yes, not with rage, with the kind of distant curiosity you bring to a storm you outran. I hope he finds a therapist. I hope he discovers that his anger was a costume for a fear he didn't know how to name. I hope he stays away. I think about Amanda daily. She texts me pictures of plants she loves, with captions like "healed" and "learning patience," and "this one needs more light, working on it." She comes over on Sundays, and we cook and talk, and sometimes say nothing at all, which is its own brave language. I think about my mother. I keep her diary in my desk and open it on days when numbers feel too much like numbers and not enough like choices. The page with her note about dignity is worn thin. I want to slide it into a frame and hang it in the office, but I don't. Some things you keep where they started doing their work. And I think about the woman who sat on a curb with 2 suitcases and a dead phone and the kind of silence that wraps around your heart like a hand. I talk to her sometimes. I tell her what we built. I tell her about the room of next. I tell her about the key with the wing and the hummingbirds and the way Miss Rita's socks make everyone feel like the world is comically survivable. "You made it," I say to her. "You played the card life, left in your hand. You didn't just win. You changed the game." She doesn't answer. She dissolves into me. I dissolve into her. We stand up. We go back to work. The first summer after the divorce felt like a small house, with its windows open. Air moved through rooms that used to hold their breath. Light found corners that had learned to hide. Amanda was different, not louder, clearer. She'd walk the courtyards with a clipboard and a smile that people recognized as the same thing. She wore her keys on a lanyard, like a teacher who knew what every door was for. When she watered the little bed of rosemary and mint by the office, the plant stood taller, and so did she. We moved forward like people who had decided to. The Eileen Sky Foundation became a thing you could touch. David called on a Monday with the EIN and said, "Congratulations, you're official." I wrote the mission on a whiteboard in the office and made everyone read it out loud. "We fund soft landings. We keep the lights on, literally and figuratively. We believe dignity is a right, not a reward. Our first board meeting happened around A folding table with iced tea sweating in plastic cups. Lucia from the library brought a binder thicker than hope and a pen shaped like a fountain. Roy sat straight-backed, as if the chair might judge him. Nia had sticky notes everywhere, a constellation of competence. Miss Rita came as community voice, wearing her signature fuzzy socks and a t-shirt that said, "Not all heroes wear capes. Some wear orthotics. We set goals like meals. Ambitious, practical, nourishing. Apartment E, funded for a year. 2 more emergency units at Hummingbird Court. The Eileen Walker granted the library, expanded to cover certification fees. CNA, HVAC apprentice, paralegal. A monthly tenant rights workshop with a pro bono, attorney and good coffee. When I signed the resolution adopting the mission, my hand shook. Not with fear, but with the recognition that my life had become a series of signatures that built something bigger than my grief. Amanda enrolled in 2 classes at Austin Community College for the fall, Intro to Social Work and Nonprofit Finance. She got a partial scholarship through the foundation. We argued, she relented. Then she wrote a check back to the fund for the same amount when she could. Stubbornness runs in the family. On the first day of class, she texted me a picture of a hallway with linoleum that looked like it had seen every version of a person. Her message said, "I'm the older one, and I'm okay with that." In the evenings, she studied at the office after hours. She'd make a pot of peppermint tea and spread her papers out on the table like maps. Sometimes a tenant would knock, not with a problem, but with a question that couldn't fit in their apartment. How do I talk to my son about his father? How do I make dinner with $6? How do I stop being afraid? Amanda would listen, tilting her head the way she did as a child when she wanted to hear everything. She didn't give answers. She made space. Sometimes that's the only answer that matters. Hummingbird Court found its rhythm. The room of next became a thing people said in sentences. I met with Nia in the room of next. You can cry in the room of next, and nobody asks you to apologize for water. We added a bookcase and a small sign. No shame past this door. Gwen, the retired bus driver, became our unofficial morale officer. She'd stick her head into the office and announce hydration check and hand out water bottles like a blessing. One taught guitar to 3 kids who could barely hold the chords and didn't care. Hector fixed a broken railing in the time it took for the coffee to brew. Mira organized a Sunday morning fix-it for the seniors. Oil squeaky hinges, replace. Batteries in smoke detectors. Test air filters. Remind people they weren't alone. In mid-June, we threw a little party for no reason, except that survival needs celebration as much as it needs shelter. People brought casseroles and stories. Miss Rita read a poem about laundry that made everyone laugh and then go quiet because it turned out to be about forgiveness. The final confrontation didn't arrive as a storm. It arrived the way trouble often does, with a smile that isn't a smile and a bruise you'll notice tomorrow. It was a Saturday in August, Tenant Rights Workshop Day. We had flyers, name tags, a sign-in sheet that reminded us people exist on paper when they need protection. The pro bono attorney, Mr. Alvarez, with the gentle cadence of a man who taught middle school before he passed the bar, was explaining the basics of notice. Periods when the door opened and Chad walked in. The room reacted like a single organism. Shoulders tightened. Eyes shifted. A hush spread that wasn't silence. He wore a clean shirt and an expression designed to say he was behaving. Behind him, the heat haloed the doorway like a warning dot. He looked around, registered the faces, mine, Amanda's, Roy's, and smiled the smile that had once worked on Amanda and never on me. "I'm here for the workshop," he said, bright. "This is a private event for residents and guests." Roy said smoothly, "You aren't on the list." Chad spread his hands. "I'm a citizen, aren't I? I want to learn my rights." Mr. Alvarez lifted his chin politely. "We can email you the public resources," he offered. Chad's eyes flicked to Amanda. "I've been emailing her," he said. "She ignores me." Amanda stood. She'd chosen a denim shirt that morning and rolled the sleeves like a woman, ready to work. Her voice didn't wobble. "We're divorced," she said. "There's a no-contact clause, except through counsel. You know that." The room held its breath so the law could speak. Chad laughed softly. "You think these papers make you free?" He took a step forward, then another, closing space the way he always had. Casually, then completely. I stood too, not between them, but beside Amanda. Our shoulders almost touched. "Chad," I said, kind and sharp at once. "This is a trespass warning. You need to leave." He looked from my face to the sign on the wall. Safe Alliance Office Hours. He looked back and saw that we meant the words we had made. "You're scared of me," he said, triumphant, like fear was something you owed him. "No," I said. "We're done with you." He tried again, a different trick. He shifted to soft. "Mandy," he said, using the name he knew she hated. "Remember us? Before? We were good." Amanda's chin lifted. "We were young," she said. "And I didn't know what I was saying yes to. I know now." Chad's face hardened, the way wet cement does under sun. He took another step. Roy stepped forward too, not as a threat, but as a wall. Nia had already moved to the back where the phone sat. We had a plan. We had rehearsed it without ever speaking it out loud. An off-duty officer we'd hired for the workshop, Officer Melanie Cruz, stood from her chair near the door. She was small, strong, and calm. "Sir," she said, the word flat and steady. "You've been asked to leave. I need you to comply." Chad stared at her badge like it had betrayed him. He turned back to Amanda for one more try. "You don't have to be like her," he said, jerking his chin toward me. "Hard. Cold. A landlord with a pity fund." Amanda's mouth curved. "She's not cold," she said. "She's clear." Officer Cruz stepped closer. "Sir?" Chad looked at the room and saw nothing he could bend. He laughed once, ugly, shook his head, and walked backward out the door like a man, leaving a stage he thought was his. He stopped in the frame, turned to me, and said, almost conversationally, "I hope you know the difference between winning and living." I smiled, small. "I do," I said. "Do you?" He left. The room exhaled. Mr. Alvarez cleared his throat and, with a teacher's grace, said, "Okay, so notice periods." As we were saying, Amanda sat. Her hands were steady on the table. I touched her elbow. She didn't need me to. That was the miracle and the melancholy. My child had grown a spine in a house I built with boundaries. Pride and sorrow can be roommates if you give them separate drawers. That night, we hung the frame. I had taken my mother's diary to a conservator, who pressed the page flat, mended the tiny tear at the corner, and mounted it on archival, matting the color of a sky right before rain. The words sat under glass like they'd been waiting to be seen, not just by me, but by anyone who needed them. We gathered in the office. The board, tenants, contractors, neighbors who had become something else. On the wall behind my desk, between the bulletin board and a photograph of Hummingbird Court's courtyard at dusk, Roy drilled 2 anchors and cleared the dust with a hand like a blessing. Amanda held the frame. Her hands didn't shake. Mine did. I read the excerpt before we hung it, my voice steady, because my mother deserved steady. Margie, if you ever find this, it's not about greed, it's about dignity, Lucia cried. So did I. So did half the courtyard. Miss Rita sniffed, and then ruined the moment with a joke about mineral rights and mineral water that made us laugh the way you laugh when you love someone enough to let them be ridiculous. We lifted the frame, together, me and Amanda, mother and daughter, grief and growth, and we set it on the hooks until it found its home. It did. The room changed. Spaces do that when you finally tell the truth in them. Beneath the frame, a brass plate, the Eileen room. Dignity lives here. People filed past, like a quiet parade. Gwen touched the glass and whispered, "Thank you, Eileen," as if my mother were standing there, and somehow she was. I closed my eyes and felt her hand on my back. The way it had steadied me through the screen door of childhood. The way it had steadied me when I found the diary. The way it steadied me now. Amanda slipped her arm through mine. She'd be proud. She said, "I am," I said, and realized I was answering her and my mother and the woman I used to be, all at once. Life didn't turn into a highlight reel. It became something better. A sequence of good days with work in them. We bought one more building, small and stubborn. A 6-unit on a street with a name that sounded like a lullaby. Maple Row. The seller was an out-of-state aunt who'd fallen into landlording by accident and wanted out. We took it. We painted the doors a color you had to smile to describe. The neighbors brought brownies, and one of them, an older man named Clarence, with a veteran's posture and a gardener's hands, taught us how to coax tomatoes out of stingy soil. He became family before we learned his last name. The Eileen Sky Foundation grew cautiously. We added a fund called Last 100, because sometimes a life falls apart for want of $100. We paid a car repair here, a deposit there, a cap and gown fee for a GED graduate who wanted to walk at 62. We kept receipts and humility. We learned to say no as a form of stewardship. We learned to say yes without asking people to perform their pain. Amanda thrived in school and at work. She cried sometimes, but not like the old days. She started therapy with a woman named Tessa, who had a laugh that built trust, like scaffolding. She joined a study group with a nursing student named Jasmine and an HVAC apprentice named Marco. They met in the room of Next and solved for X in lives that had been told X was too complicated for them. One Sunday after tacos, Amanda said, "I might date again someday." She said it like a question she wasn't answering yet. I nodded and said, "Good." Then we watched a movie and fell asleep on opposite ends of the sofa, like a pair of bookends that finally had a story to hold up. Every few months, I drove to the cemetery where my husband's name lived in stone. I'd sit on the bench and tell him the updates, the way I used to narrate the Sunday paper to him when chemo made his eyes tired. "The lights work," I said once, and he knew I meant more than bulbs. "She's okay," I said another time, and the wind moved just enough to feel like agreement. I never told him about the night at the table when I made chicken pot pie and learned that love without boundaries is a house with no door. I didn't need to. He already knew the slope of our sorrow. I told him the rest. The part where we built rooms for other people to breathe in. He liked that part best. I could tell by the way the shade fell on the grass, kind and exact. In late fall, Lucia called from the library. "You should come," she said. Now, I drove over, thinking of 1,000 disasters, and one joy I didn't dare name. The library smelled like old stories and new chances. Lucia led me to a corner near the computer lab where a small display had been set up. The Eileen Walker Grant recipients, then and now. Photos of women with clear eyes, quotes in their handwriting. I learned QuickBooks and stopped letting my brother do my books badly. Shanice. I passed my CNA exam. I hold hands for a living. Alma. I am not scared of forms anymore. Terry in the middle. A photo of my mother at 25. Taken by my father before either of them knew the shape of their lives. The caption, "She believed in dignity. We did the paperwork." I put my hand over my mouth and laughed into my palm like a woman who needed to keep the joy from spilling. Lucia squeezed my shoulder. "You did this," she said. "No," I said. "We did." She nodded. "We is my favorite miracle. The last time I saw Chad, really saw him, it was by accident at a gas station on North Lamar. He was at pump 6. I was at 3. He spotted me and froze. For a second, the old choreography tugged at us. The step toward, the script that always ended in heat without light. I shook my head. Not angry. Done. He looked at the ground, then at me. His face was a map of bad choices and unlearned lessons. He opened his mouth, closed it, nodded once. A concession to the life we'd all decided not to live anymore. He got in his car and drove away. I didn't watch him go. I watched the sky instead, because it was spectacular and didn't require anything from me except appreciation. On the day Amanda finished her first semester, we walked through Hummingbird Court at dusk. The lights came on one by one, sensors doing their quiet job. You could hear a pot clatter in someone's kitchen, a laugh from the porch club, a guitar, string being tuned, a child asking for 5 more minutes outside, please. "Finals are over," she said. "Incredulous? You did it," I said. She slipped her hand into mine. We did it. We stopped in front of the office. Inside, the frame glowed like a lighthouse. A woman I didn't recognize stood looking at it, reading the words my mother had written. She wiped her cheeks and smiled at nothing and everything. Then she turned, saw us, and nodded as if we had all agreed in another language that this was how it should be. "Come on," Amanda said, tugging me toward the room of next. "I want to add something to the board." There was a board on the wall, a simple cork rectangle with a sign above it. What scared you and you did it anyway? People had pinned notes like flags. Called the credit card company. Asked for a plan. Left at lunch. Didn't go back. Took my GED without apologizing for being 60. Amanda wrote on a small card. Her handwriting firmer than it used to be. I chose myself. I stayed gone. I came home to me. She pinned it between two others and stepped back. We stood there like people in a museum that finally had a wing for the ordinary. Do you think it's over? She asked after a long quiet. His shadow. Shadows never go, I said. But they get smaller when you move toward light. She nodded. Then let's keep walking. We walked the property, checking little things that add up to a life. A wobbly step, a mailbox that stuck, a neighbor who needed someone to open a jar. We solved what we could. We wrote sticky notes for the rest. We remembered to laugh. We remembered to rest. At the end of the loop, we stood in the courtyard and looked up. The sky was the right kind of dramatic. Hummingbirds dipped near the bougainvillea, like living punctuation. Tell me the line again, Amanda said, grin tugging at her mouth. What line? The one you told me that day, about the fire. I smiled. You sent me into the cold, I said. Not bitter, just accurate. And I learned how to build my own fire. She nodded. We learned. Yes, I said. We did. I used. To think vengeance was the twist at the end of a story. I know better now. The twist is this. The reckoning wasn't about them. It was about us. It was about the woman I became when there were no witnesses, and the kindnesses that built a life. Nobody can evict me from Dot. They called me a freeloader once. Now I feed people. With rent that makes sense. With lights that turn on. With a room where your next breath is already paid for. They called me cold. Now I keep keys on a hook and hand them to women with shaking hands and say, this is yours. Start where you are. If you're listening from a motel room with peeling wallpaper and a vending machine that eats your quarters, hear me. There may be a card left in your hand that you haven't turned over yet. Maybe it isn't money. Maybe it's a library, a friend, a diary you haven't opened, a version of yourself you've been saving for last. Play it. Tell me where you're watching from. Tell me what scared you, and you did it anyway. And if you ever come to Austin, stop by Hummingbird Court or Brookshire Meadows or the little 6-unit on Maple Row. We'll be on the porch. We'll save you a chair. We'll point to the frame on the wall and let my mother have the last word. It's not about greed. It's about dignity. And dignity, it turns out, is a beautiful place to live.